Hello and welcome to Wheels Boy Lockdown Chat, the show where we get together to discuss topics related to the Chinese car industry in order to pass our time during the lockdown here in Shanghai. I am Shanghai. I've been locked down too long, but there is good news on that front. And the news is that we are, in theory at least, all three of us will be released. The entire city of Shanghai will be released starting tomorrow. We're recording this on Tuesday, the 30th. 31st, looking at the calendar.
31st, yeah.
Thank you. And the 1st is supposed to be, the grand opening up of Shanghai. So this could potentially be the last episode of Wheels Boy Lockdown Chat in this format. I just want to take a second to very, very big thanks to both of my guests, Mark and Elliot, who've been hanging with us this entire time, helping us to put something out for you guys to watch and providing, being great guests. So thanks to both of you for that.
Thank you. Kept us sane anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I know you guys kind of appreciated having something to do as well, so it was mutually beneficial, but I really appreciate it. But we do have at least one more episode, and the topic for today's episode is actually, I think, going to be a really, really interesting one, I hope, and that is, what is the best EV sedan from a Chinese car maker? Obviously, there are a good number of competitors. We've decided to kind of stick towards what I would describe as the Tesla Model 3 category, more or less, which is to say kind of a compact, more rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, slightly up from entry-level EV sedans. So that means we're not going to be talking about the Ion S, which we've driven on the channel. We're not going to be talking about the P5, the XPeng P5, but we are going to be talking about an XPeng. Let's go on to our introduction of our three choices. So Mark, why don't you talk about yours first?
Okay, so NIO ET7, really a fabulous car in pretty much every respect. First of all, it's got coupe kind of lines to it. So
now, don't go into your exterior styling yet. This is just the.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
No. Mark is extremely excited to talk about the styling of the ET7. That's going to be our next thing. I just want to get an introduction. So that's okay. That's okay. I appreciate your enthusiasm. I will introduce my choice. As I said, we're going to be talking about an XPeng. I should mention most of the photos of the ET7 and the P7 are from dear Mark. Thank you, Mark, for allowing us to use these. They're very good.
Welcome.
So the P7 is going to be my choice. I like the P7. I'm excited to talk about it. But let's get quickly onto our third contestant. Elliot, who have you chosen?
I've got the BYD Han, probably one of the best-selling sedan EVs in China for a while anyway. So let's see how it compares to your two cars.
All right, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a decent competition. Our best luxury SUV category one was I think pretty competitive, and I think this one will be too. Certainly more than the mini electric one was. I do want to mention that we're not talking about certain vehicles. The BYD Seal wasn't a contestant because guess what? None of us have driven it. No one's really driven it. We've never seen it in the flesh, so we look forward to driving the Seal and maybe having a participate in a future video, but right now it doesn't really make sense for us to talk about a car we've never driven in terms of its dynamics and stuff. So these are the contestants that we have. Now, Mark, now is the time. We're going to go into our first category. We're judging on 5 categories: exterior styling, interior styling, performance, range, because these are EVs, and then value. So exterior and interior styling are very subjective. We're going to be voting, but you can't vote for your own car. And then performance range are going to be objective, just go by the numbers, and then value will also have a nice vote there at the end to conclude. But it is time for exterior styling. Mark, why do you think the ET7 should be the winner?
Well, obviously, it's incredibly sleek looking design. It really looks as if it should be a hatchback, to be honest, with that back, but it is actually a sedan. You've got a strong waistline. You've got also one key point, actually, the LiDAR integrated on the top of the windscreen, which is done in a very good way, I think. If you look at, for example, the Weltmeister M7, it looks like it's got warts. It's got these protrusions coming out of it everywhere, and it's so unsightly. NIO have done an incredibly good job, I think, of integrating it without... it is a feature, definitely, but it's tastefully done. It's well integrated into the design. So the ET7, I believe I'm right, and is currently the second most aerodynamic car in the world. So it's got a drag coefficient of 0.208. And that is just slightly less aerodynamic than the Mercedes EQS.
That's for
have
EV enthusiasts.
Have I got it the right way round this time? The name.
Someone in the comments will correct you if you don't.
Right.
Coefficient to drag. That's pornographic details for EV enthusiasts. I'm going to switch to the next image, so just to give the guys, the viewers, a view of the rear. And you can see there, as Mark pointed out, and you can see the obvious the lines there in this lighting of the rear trunk opening, trunk not hatch. Yeah,
it's got a very sort of sloping coupe style back to it. So as I said, it really looks as if it should be a hatchback, like a Model S. Shame.
One good thing the Model S for sure has is a hatchback. So having spoken about the ET7, we'll move on to the other 7, which is the P7. That is my choice. Now I think in my review of the P7, which I did some time ago, I described the design as being, it is very smooth. The ET7 is very similar. I described it as looking like one of those river rocks that's just been inside of a rock that's been tumbling through a river for just, however many hundreds of years or whatever, and it's just worn completely smooth. I really like the way it looks, but I think the thing that's really setting the P7 apart is one word, and that is lightsabers. Now, why am I talking about lightsabers? Because the designers of the P7 insist that the front upper DRL lighting strip there is inspired by lightsabers, and that in and of itself, I think, makes it worthy of a win. I think it's a sleek looking car. I think even to this day, it is a standout design, even though it's now going on probably 3 years old. I think it really is an eye-catching thing when you see it on the road. I really like the way it looks. Now, I will say the rear is my least favorite part of the P7, and I think the P5 suffers from this too. Not to talk down on my own choice, but I just think that it's just a little bit bland to me. I also, it has the same problem the ET7 has in that it looks like it should be a hatch, but it's got a traditional trunk opening. One thing it does the ET7 have this? Because I should say, I haven't driven the ET7. The other two have. Elliot's the only one that's driven all of these cars. Mark has driven all of them except the Han. But does the ET7 have a frunk?
No.
No, it doesn't.
That's going to win me the value category. The P7 has a frunk, instant plus 10 cool points. But I really do like the way that the P7 looks. I think it's a very smooth and still very modern design all these years later. But let's move on to our third contestant. Oh, sorry. Almost forgot.
Oh.
How could I forget my trump card? The P7 Wing. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, what started off as kind of a fun, jokety joke from XPeng is actually a production vehicle that is available to buy. It is the most expensive version of the P7. It is the P7 Wing, which, as you can see, has Lamborghini doors, baby. Doors that go like this. And it's awesome. If you want to see those in like operating in person or see them live, kind of, you can go watch our footage from the Guangzhou Auto Show, I think it was, of the XPeng stand, and I get out of a P7 Wing. It's awesome. But yes, let's move on to our third contestant, and that is the BYD Han. Elliot.
Yeah, I think once you've shown that luminous green P7, I can't really compete with that, really. But yeah, this is obviously the more kind of traditional looking sedan. It's not as probably iconic as the other two. I think the P7 is very iconic. ET7, very, very good looking car. So this is obviously more traditional, but this was such a massive step forwards for BYD at the time. It was like, oh wow, okay, they can design cars as well now. Before they were they were a bit hideous, actually, some of them.
Yeah, truth be told.
I think the Chin, the one you see in the shared taxis all around Shanghai, is not a good looking car, just all out of proportion. But this shows that they've got the technology and now the design skills. And it's not a bad looking sedan. They've got this dragon kind of motifs on the front end. They talk about a blend of the East and the West. And I think it's got kind of a nice profile. It's not a small car. I think it might be one of the biggest, closer to the ET7 perhaps.
Yeah.
But it's packed full of practicalities. And they've kept kind of their BYD design touches to a minimum here. They haven't gone too overboard. And I quite like that back window where they've got the cut on that silver kind of, is that the C-pillar?
I believe it's
kind
C-pillar,
of
yes.
Bit Mustang-like. So yeah, I think a big step forward for BYD, but now maybe it doesn't stand out quite so much. I do like the rear end view. If you've got that, photo.
I do. The rear end view. This is the 2022, I should say. This is the latest version.
This is the first time I've seen this. Big improvement. Really like that knot design they've got in the lights. Yeah, I think overall very kind of just good looking standard kind of sedan, and I think that's got the same trunk or boot that you guys have as well. So
I think the thing about the Han that I've always said, and it remains true for this mid-cycle refresh, which is what we're looking at for this 2022 model, is it kind of toes the line between. So one of the reasons, if I go back, one of the reasons, and I'm sure you guys know, is that one of the reasons this car looks more like a traditional sedan is because there was a petrol or a gasoline powered version of it. I do believe there was at one point a pure petrol, but there's always been. Yeah. And then there's also the DMI, the plug-in hybrid or hybrid version. And so those have a more traditional grille opening on the front that they need, I'm assuming, for cooling. And also, I think, more importantly for BYD and for their electric sub-brands here, or sublines of electric versions, is that it differentiates the electric version from the version that has the hybrid with the real traditional grille. So that's one of the reasons that I think that this car comes off as a more traditional sedan is because it was a traditional sedan. It was also sold that way. So it kind of needed to thread the needle between the two. And that's also, I think, going to be a theme when we get to the interior as well. But I'll wait for that. I don't know. We'll bring back around here to the beginning so we can have our vote. So remember, you can't vote for your own vehicle. So Mark, you can go first. You're representing the ET7, so you can choose between the P7 and the Han. Which one is going to be your choice?
Got to be the P7. I mean, the P7 is such a great looking car.
Yes. Yeah, I can't disagree. So that brings it to myself. This is actually a little bit harder. And the reason, the angle that makes this hard for me, because I really do think that the ET7 is great looking. And I especially like the rear view of it, the rear 3/4, I think is great. I think it has a really well integrated rear lighting, like the whole complex or whatever you want to call it. It looks really, really good. The other thing though is that I think that's also, if I flip through here, the wing, that's the strongest, this is the strongest view of the Han as well, because especially with this mid-cycle refresh, as Elliot pointed out, I love the taillights. Same ones you see on the, very similar to on the Dolphin. This kind of Chinese, not traditional, knot tying inspired kind of look is so cool. And personally, maybe it's because I'm American, but I love that rear, I think it's technically the D pillar. That D pillar silver element there that looks like kind of air vents or whatever it would be. I can't remember what the term is now, because it used to be they would have them on like muscle cars, the rear windows.
Louvers.
Louvers, thank you, louvers. I really like that, but I do have to overall give the win to the ET7 because it is just a really beautiful car, and it manages to be a very beautiful car while also having a really good, as we discussed, coefficient to drag. Elliot, that brings us to yourself.
I love the ET7. I do think the P7 is a bit more iconic. It really just kind of threw out the rule book and showed us what a Chinese kind of EV brand could do. So it's P7 for me.
Yeah. Point for the P7. Exterior styling is going to go to the P7. I should say, I forgot to do this at the beginning of the video. It's a new thing, but I'm going to do, I'm sure you guys will bring yours up too. I'm going to do my wrist check I'm wearing a Casio GM 2100B3PR, I believe it's pronounced. So this is the
Sponsors, please contact Ethan at
please Casio. I'm
wheelsbody.com.
here. I got a few Casios. Listen. I'll take almost anybody at this point. Hublot, not interested. Not interested in Hublot. Invicta, do not apply. But guys, any contestants in the wrist check category?
No, I'm not wearing a watch today.
Another win for me, looks like. So, winner yet again. So that brings us to our second subjective vote-based category, and that is going to be interior styling. Mark, why don't you talk to us about the ET7?
Right. I think with the ET7, they've gone a minimalist kind of route, similar to Tesla to an extent, but it's obviously got more than the Tesla has, where it's actually got the two screens. You've got the central screen plus the instrument display. You've also got...
I apologize because people are going to talk about this in the comments. We're talking about comparing it to the Tesla Model 3, not the Model S. The Model S and other models. So the Model 3, Model Y don't have a instrument cluster.
Model 3. You've also got a head-up display as well, which obviously is quite a bonus. Now, I mentioned last week in the one we did about the SUVs that the ET7 really levels up the quality. And quite honestly, I when I tested the ET7, I had probably about 2 weeks prior to that, maybe tested an Audi A7L.
Mm-hmm.
And just everything about the ET7 seemed to be so much better than the Audi. The quality of the materials, just the general feel of it. It was also so much lighter thanks to the panoramic roof that you have. What I really like is, get the correct name, the Karoon material made of rattan kind of wood, goes through some sort of process that they've specially developed. And that really has the great tactile feel to it.
Can you see that? Is that visible on the screen right now?
Sorry,
yeah,
quite small. So it should be. Basically, it's all the inserts.
Okay.
So you've got strips of it in many places. It's the sort of grayish, it's a kind of lightish gray kind of color that's showing. I mean, it perhaps doesn't look that great color-wise, but the feel of it is really, really nice. What else? Oh yeah, there is a vegan leather option, although the one I tested had the Napa leather in it. You've got a 1,000 watt speaker system, and it's got 23 speakers in total, and it's the second car to have a Dolby Atmos system built into the car.
What's the first?
I think it's the EQS again. They very much seem to be like really benchmarking against the EQS, I feel.
Yeah. And for the record, when this car was announced in 2020, I believe it was end of 2020, a NIO Day, Li Qinhong, I think is the name of the CEO, he said specifically, this is not aimed at Tesla Model S. This is aimed at the 7 Series and the S-Class and the A8. This is aimed at the Germans. So, not surprising.
Very much. It definitely is. When you get in it, you just see they are really, as I said, it's such a step up from the previous NIO models. It's not that the previous NIO models were bad by any means. They were not. But you just feel they've really got their game together now with the ET7. What else about it? The seats in the rear are really quite far back. They're really between the C and the D pillar. So you've got quite good leg room as a result, although the boot space is not particularly good. Is this the time to start talking about computing power or not?
I think we're gonna save that. We're gonna touch on autonomous driving features and stuff like that.
Okay, all
just
right. I'll
briefly.
leave it till there. Yeah.
We'll save that.
Okay,
For the
I think
performance
that's pretty
category.
much all I have to say about the interior.
All right. Well, I gotta say I haven't seen it myself in person, but it's from the pictures. Here's how it looks good. It looks really really nice. And I think it's almost cheating because this is such a great light colored interior that when we switch to my P7, it just looks a little bit dark. However, I will make a good effort here because I do think the interior of the P7 does have its highlights. I think when I drive the P7, it is a more direct competitor to the Model 3. The ET7, we must acknowledge it's a little bit more premium. It's a little bit more of an Tesla Model S competitor, but the ET5, no one's driven it, so can't compete in this category anyways. But the P7's interior design is definitely very simplistic, much like the ET7, much like the Model 3, but I do think that it has the, in my opinion, all-important instrument cluster, which I really care about. I think the material quality is definitely not going to be up to ET7 levels, but I do think it's better than a Tesla Model 3, for example. Fit and finish is generally pretty impressive in their cars. And the other thing that I would say is that they have a very, very good UI. I really like the XPeng UI. I think it's very intuitive. I think it's very easy to use. You got that big, huge, beautiful screen with very snappy, really fast refresh rates. And the voice control system is, I can't think of a car that has a better one. In terms
It is
of,
very good.
yeah, the response times are very quick. The breadth of commands. I personally don't use voice commands, but I know it's important to certain consumers, and so I have to acknowledge that. Also, built-in speakers into the headrests as an option. So not Dolby Atmos certainly, but definitely has a pretty good sound system. And it also it's useful also for when you're driving and for things like warning beeps and stuff. It's a little bit more of a immersive experience. So it makes it easier to hear. Space-wise, again, we're not going to compare them directly because it's not exactly the same category, but I will say the problem with the P7, and this is something we've touched on before, is that the P7's packaging is a little bit can be faulted for sure. Its packaging isn't as good as it could be, meaning you have a car that is larger on the outside than a Model 3 and should be, and is, I think, it feels more roomy on the inside than a Model 3, but it should be roomier based on the exterior dimensions. I've always felt that the cockpit experience, while not cramped, it's not a compact, it's not a city car or anything, it doesn't feel as roomy. That's especially true in the rear seats, which I found to be not a road trip vehicle, frankly. Not that one of our partners at the Wheels Boy team has a Model 3, a standard range Model 3, and I spent a lot of time in the rear seat of that too, and it's not great. So it's not like one's good and one's bad, but neither of them is particularly impressive in terms of rear seating. But yeah, that's my pitch for the P7. I think it does it very well. Mm-hmm.
The P5 has actually got more interior space than the P7, allegedly.
Yes, it does. Mostly, I think, thanks to that front wheel drive architecture. Right, it doesn't have that. Doesn't have a transmission tunnel and all these dual motor things.
There's no transmission tunnel.
Oh no, it doesn't. It doesn't have a transmission. I'm sorry, that was stupid. It does not have the same packaging issues, I think, and that's credit where credit is due, because XPeng that's one of their later models. They said, okay, this is something we need to fix. So I look forward to seeing what the second generation of P7. We're on the mid-cycle refresh at this point. It's going to be released this year, I believe, and so I'm looking forward to see what the second gen, which will be here in a couple of years, I assume, what they do with that. So, Elliot, talk to us about the BYD Han. We have this render for us.
Well, you've chosen the brown interior for me. Thank you. I mean, the one I drove had the red interior, quite similar to yours.
Yes, right.
There's no blue option.
Is there a blue option?
There should be. Talk to Yamaha and talk to the Letting Men Go. See if we can get some Mango colors going.
I'm sure with the right amount of money, you could get the blue option. Now, this car was the most traditional on the outside, and I think on the inside there is some of that as well. But there are some really nice touches for BYD that I like in here. You do have that massive, I think it's 15-inch screen, which if you press a button goes from landscape to portrait and back again. That was the first car to do that. I think people are freaking out about Tesla being able to do that now, but
Tesla can do that now?
I think the Chin Pro was.
Oh, Oh yeah, the Chin, yeah.
But
The
BYD
Chin
was
Pro
certainly the
version,
first
or
brand.
Chin
Yeah,
Plus, I think
BYD
it's
was the
now called.
first, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
they all can do it
And
now.
yeah, so like Mark said about the ET7, this was such a big step up for BYD to kind of step into this luxury field. The leather in there is pretty decent. They got this kind of pleated or quilted kind of leather in the doors. It's such a massive step up. It's probably not quite to the standard of, well, it's not to the standard of the ET7. Maybe comparable to the P7.
I'd say
But they
so.
do kind of, they go 100% and they go the extra 10% too far. So whilst I like some of the design features in here, so they got these really cool like jet fighter kind of air vents, which they are fantastic. Such a great design feature. But then on the dash, you've kind of got this kind of EV blue pattern behind this kind of clear acrylic screen. It's like, you didn't really need to do that. So it's very BYD. It's BYD through and through. But it's super comfortable. Back seats are great. Lots of leg room. I thought it feels quite airy in the cabin, more so than the P7. I think overall as a package, it's not too bad. I think this might be the oldest of the three cars.
By a little bit,
So-
I think. Yeah.
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, so I think things change so quickly here that the next Han will be a huge step forwards again. So this was kind of it doesn't have the 1,000-watt speakers, it doesn't have all of the features you guys have, but I think the next one will take it to the next level. But not a bad interior.
Certainly sells well anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they know their market. I think they know their market. And I will say that the advantage that the P7, excuse me, and the ET7 have over the Han is that because they are such minimalist interiors, I do think that they're naturally going to age better. The less details you have, you know what I mean? I feel like obviously the tech ages, but maybe the overall aesthetic will age a little bit better for those two cars. But yeah, and I would also, Elliot, to the credit of the Han, the back seat of the Han is so much better than in terms of size, it goes P7 is the smallest, then the Han, then the ET7. And I think based on what you guys, maybe, Elliot, you're the only one that's maybe ridden in the back seat of all of them. Have you ridden in the back seat of the Han?
Yeah.
So the Han's back seat is very comfortable. Adjustability, it has adjustable rake, which is a pretty nice feature to have. I would say that it's a great car to ride in the back of, way better than a P7. And I don't know about the ET7 because I haven't ridden in it, but maybe you can say for yourself which one do you think would be more comfortable.
Probably the ET7, I think, in the back. Yeah.
Makes sense.
P7 last, I think.
Yeah. But yes, it is nice. And yes, I did choose I love this creamy brown. And I if you want to see the red, I think, both our cars, the one you tested and the one we tested, both had the really cool, honestly, red interior, which is
I quite like the red.
It is nice, but it also will age
Oh,
pretty
yes.
quickly, probably.
Yeah.
Pretty quickly. So that is the three contestants. Let's bring it around back to Mark. You cannot vote for the ET7, only the P7 and the Han. What is your choice?
Going to be the P7. One thing I really like about, in fact, I prefer this to the ET7 setup, where there's two separate screens. I like the way how the screen, well, there are two screens in the P7, but I like the way they blend into each other. I like that in the car.
Let me go back to that really quick so the viewers can see it. Yes, I do think they're pretty well integrated. They don't feel clunked on.
Yeah. Obviously, NIO with its two separate screens, that's a bit of a trademark for them. But equally, I feel it looks a bit dated now, but that's my preference.
Vote for the P7. I'll take what I can get. That comes to me, so I have to choose between the ET7 and the Han. It's harder than it seems. I'm a little bit biased only because I haven't actually driven the ET7 or ridden in the ET7 yet. Based solely on the photos, I have to go with the ET7, and it's, again, I have to acknowledge it's a little bit cheating because this is a different price category of vehicle, so I expect the material qualities to be better. But yeah, I'm gonna go to flip back here. I'm gonna go with the ET7 because I know what other NIO interiors are like. I know it has the awesome gear selector that I really like, the extremely subtle. I like that it's Sorry.
And Nomi.
Everyone's favorite, Nomi, yes. Yeah, of course, my absolute favorite. Definitely going to spend $1,000+ on that or whatever it is. But so that's one vote for the ET7, one vote for the P7, and now it is Elliot's turn to decide.
I mean, for me, it's got to be the ET7 because kind of NIO set the standard on what interior of an EV can be or what an interior of a luxury car can be. So if the other guys, XPeng and BYD can follow that, then great. So it's definitely ET7 for me.
I think the Germans need to follow it as well.
Yeah,
they do. The Germans are in trouble.
I gotta say, if I'm looking at this versus the interior of an S-Class, it's very subjective. Some people prefer the insanity that is the whatever Uber screen or whatever they call it that they have in the S, the optional one in the S-Class. I think this is a much more aesthetically pleasing, less stressful thing to look at.
I do quite like the interior of the EQS.
That's what I'm so referring to, is the EQS. I sat in one, honestly, I sat in one at a dealership recently.
Okay, I haven't actually sat in one.
I'm trying to recall if it had the optional mega screen. I believe it did. But you know what I found?
But it's hugely expensive. It's not even none of them have it as standard. It's an optional extra.
Yeah. I mean, maybe because we've driven these cars and stuff, I would love to get a chance to drive an EQS. Probably we're not going to do a video of it because it doesn't make sense for the channel, but maybe I'll get someone to let me borrow one. But sitting in an EQS, I was not, and maybe because it wasn't a higher spec one, I wasn't that blown away. And the reviews that I've seen, nobody's been especially blown away. It's like, well, it's Mercedes, But
what surprises me is it's hatchback. And
that's a big point to it. Big point to it.
Yeah. Well, it's very surprising, actually.
It is, because it feels a little un-S-classy. But that moves us on to our third category, which is, again, now we're moving into the objective categories. The first is performance. Tell us about the performance, the raw numbers on the ET7.
Okay, front, 180 kilowatts. That's 241 horsepower. Rear, you've got 300 kilowatts, 402 horsepower. Now, I should say this, that despite actually having the larger motor at the rear, there is a front-wheel drive bias in the ET7, which I'm really not too sure why they've done that. I would like to have actually had it the other way around.
It is usually.
Yeah, I don't know why they've done that. And so front also 350 Newton meters, rear 500 Newton meters, and you've got top speed of 200 kilometers an hour. That's 124 miles per hour. 0 to 100 or 0 to 62 miles per hour time of 3.8 seconds.
He's just going to skate past you, Elliot. He's just going to skate past you. Oh, no. So those are the numbers. What's the total power? Sorry, if you didn't mention that for the...
Total power is 480 kilowatts, which would be... Wait a minute, I'll just have to add these two up. So 643 horsepower, I believe.
Insane amount of horsepower.
850 Newton meters of torque.
You guys have both driven it. I take it it's pretty fast.
Yes.
It is. Yeah.
So it's not, again, this always has to be said, it's not the fastest EV available. The Tesla offers, every model of Tesla offers a faster version than this, but that's never been NIO's thing.
No.
So that's not a selling point for them, even though, and frankly, 3.8 seconds is plenty freaking fast.
Enough.
Yeah,
enough.
It's enough to make you sick. So P7, the P7 comes in two different versions. There's a single rear-mounted version, single motor rear-mounted, which is 196 kilowatts and 390 newton meters of torque, and that is 267 horsepower and 289 pound-feet. I'm going all the ways, even doing pound-feet because I'm American. The 0 to 100 kilometer per hour time on that is a very reasonable 6.7 seconds. I've driven it. I spent a good amount of time in a kind of a long range version with single motor, and at no point was I thinking, oh, this is not enough power.
Yeah, it's fine.
Very adequate, even at highway speeds. But if that does occur to you, if you think, oh, no, I need something a little more, you can go for the dual motor version, which has a total of 316 kilowatts and 655 newton meters of torque. That's 430 horsepower and 485 pound-feet. Very similar numbers to like a Corvette's, like a C6, which have been the last gen Corvette V8, which I always love to see. 0 to 100 kilometer per hour time on the performance is, I believe, 4.3 seconds. And I've also driven that one, plenty fast. In fact, we drove both versions in our review of the car. So definitely not going to beat the ET7 in the raw numbers category. There was one car that I had a little bit of hope for, but I don't think it's going to happen. Elliot, tell us about the BYD Han.
So the BYD Han at one point before the ET7 was the fastest Chinese EV sedan, I think, in China or in the world, right? Mm-hmm. So if I start off with that, the 0 to 100 kilometers speed is 3.9 seconds, which is pretty quick. And that's all powered on the all-wheel drive version, so I'm just going to go for that one, it's got 486 horsepower and 363 kilowatts of power, and 330 newton meters of torque. So,
well, hold on, only 330 newton meters? Got to be more than that. Maybe that's only one motor. Hold on, I've got all the stats pulled up.
That could be the single motor one.
I think that might be the single motor one. Let me find this. Let me find. 700. 700.
Oh, 700. Yeah. Okay, 700.
Yeah.
So I was like, pretty impressive when BYD came out with this. It's like, wow, okay, in under 4 seconds. And they always, on the back of BYD, they always write it's 0 to 100 kilometers an hour time. I think that's brilliant. Yeah. So you see like these kind of older BYDs, like the Tang, the SUV, and it says 4.3S. I'm like, what's that? Oh, 0 to 100 in 4.3 seconds. Great. I hope BYD never get rid of that.
It's fun. It's
just
fun.
Get rid of build your dreams.
Yes, please just get rid of that.
Do you know what, on the speaking, it was the previous generation Tang was 4.9 seconds, and also on the side they had 542. And so that I never knew what that stood for. I before I even knew it was a hybrid. I know it is now because it's a sub 5 second 0 to 60 or 0 to 100, kilometer an hour. 4-wheel drive and 542. What's the 2? Dual motor.
The 2 is the dual
dual drivetrains, I think, because it's electric motors or electric motor at least. But I mean, even when that car came out, which was some years ago, because the Tang's been out for a few years, the current generation of Tang, the 4.9 seconds. I mean, who knows what conditions you have to be in? Yeah, but yeah.
Oh, I've seen them being drag raced. They are fast.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty crazy. And that was a slightly smaller car than the current Tang, too. So I think probably whips. But yes, for this category, unsurprisingly being the most expensive, it's going to have the most power. The ET7 is going to win. So we are going to move on to another interesting category. Obviously for EV. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm going to go back to performance because this is something that I wanted to include because a lot of our viewers really like to keep up to date on what Chinese automakers are doing in terms of their autonomous driving tech. I should get away from the Han for this one. And so I wanted to touch really quickly on what, if any, features are currently available for our given model. So what do we know so far about the ET7's semi-autonomous driving technology, or ADAS?
We don't know much, really. We know what sensors it has, what computing power it has, but what this is actually going to mean in real life and what it can actually do, we have no idea.
Yeah.
As far as I know, anyway, nothing's been announced about what features are going to be coming with it. Certainly nothing I've read, anyway. But what I can tell you is it's got a total of 33 sensors. So obviously we've got the LiDAR, we've got millimeter wavelength radars, we've got cameras, what else we've got? I think that's pretty much it. We've got a NIO ET7 supercomputer platform, and that uses 4 NVIDIA Orin X chips.
Ooh.
Impressive, I know.
Elliot and I are just like, cool, good.
Okay,
great. Maybe someone in the comments.
It's got something like 1,000 odd. Was it TOPS or something? It's to do with the amount of calculations it can do in a second.
Yes. And it is some ridiculous number. I was looking this up for our ET5 video, and to be fair, this is the response that I got from if anyone remembers back to our ET5 video where I was like, yeah, well, ET5, LiDAR, and you guys, or maybe it was my BYD Seal video or something, you guys were like,
Yeah.
Nothing. Yes, the XPeng P7 is running. I believe they haven't gotten to NGP Navigation Guided Pilot 3.5 yet because that requires the LiDAR system, which is only available.
It's coming.
It is coming, and it's going to be coming on a refresh, right?
Yeah, the P7 will get it probably later this year.
Yeah, right now it's based on, millimeter wave radar and ultrasonic sensors and cameras. I personally have used NGP 3.0. I know Mark has experienced NGP 3.0. We found it pretty impressive as those systems go. Automatic overtaking.
They actually did a drive which took the car from Guangzhou to Beijing in a relay.
Which is real far, just for context. That's real far. That's like...
it's like well over 1,000 kilometers. In fact, I think actually more like perhaps 2,000 or 3,000.
Yeah, I was going to say
about 2,000.
Yeah. And it had very good results with regard to sort of interventions and things like that.
Yeah, 95% of it was driven like autonomously, right?
Yeah. I actually took part in one of the legs of that.
You participated in that, so you can speak to that personally. But then, obviously, we're looking forward to the updated for the P7 was going to have the LiDAR, and NGP 3.5 is available on the XPeng P5, or will be available at some point. They're waiting for the software components of that, but they all have LiDAR, or the ones that came with LiDAR. But moving on from performance, I think we should move on to what is another very important category for EVs.
Doesn't the Han have anything with...
Oh, no, I'm so sorry. Back to the Han. Let me switch. Talk to us. What does the Han have?
This being the oldest one, it doesn't have that much. It's a few years older than yours, and BYD aren't. Be careful what I say here, but they're not at the forefront of this at the moment. I'm sure if they applied themselves, they could be, or maybe they're working on it in the background.
I think they are.
Yeah, they must be, right? But in this model, it doesn't really have that much. It has like lane assist. It's called D-Pilot. D-Pilot?
Right.
D-Pilot.
The UN Plus has that, doesn't it?
And it has self-parking. So it has all the kind of the basics, but it doesn't have anything more advanced than that. I think for the next model of Han, that's when we'll see what BYD can do in terms of software. So for this, sorry, I don't, not that good.
So we won't go because none of these cars are really using their systems yet. The two that kind of have these things, so we won't vote on that or anything. It's just for the audience's education and interest. But
apparently the P7 does work.
Well,
the P7 system does work.
Oh, the P7 system definitely does work. Yes.
Yeah.
And near about as advertised. So they're going to move on to another category. Obviously, we're talking about EVs. This is very important. We're going to talk about range. So, Mark, tell us about the ET7.
Okay, so currently you've got either a 75 kilowatt hour or a 100 kilowatt hour battery available. With the 100 kilowatt hour, it has a range of 705 kilometers, which is 438 miles. Now, that is CLTC. So, from what I understand, you need to perhaps deduct somewhere in the region, maybe 10% or so, to get some more of an idea of what NEDC would be. So CLTC is the most generous way of measuring range. Yeah. There is, though, going to be coming later this year, the 150 kilowatt hour semi-solid state battery. And that is meant... Well, I'm not quite sure it's going to be that heavy, actually, because part of with this a solid state is I think they can actually be lighter.
Yeah, I think so too.
But it is only semi-solid state. It was originally being sold as a solid state battery, and the first one in the world to be actually produced on a production car. But that's not quite true. Apparently, it's and that is meant to give 1,000 kilometers range.
Well, it doesn't exist now, so.
Doesn't exist now.
So let's talk a little about the XPeng P7. So the P7, it's interesting. There was, as far as when I tested it, a version available that was like the ultra long range, super long range that had, are you ready for it? 706 kilometers of range. And that
NEDC.
was NEDC, not CLTC. So here's the thing. I got to be honest. I don't know if that one's available yet. Or not available yet, I'm sorry. Available at this point in 2022. Because as far as I can tell online, the highest range I can find, and it's NEDC, is 670, which is still very respectable. And that is achieved by combining the single motor version with the 80.9 kilowatt hour battery pack. So I also want to say that that's a relatively small battery pack for delivering that kind of range. I believe that the ET7 manages CLTC 705 with a 100 kilowatt hour battery pack. Now it's a bigger, heavier car, so that's obviously a big factor, but lower coefficient to drag. So I think the P7 is admirably efficient in terms of kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers.
That 706 kilometers, there's a little bit of a problem with that car.
Yeah,
Because there were actually 3 versions with the rear-wheel drive. However, only one of them did the 706 kilometers. The other 2 versions, which had X-Pilot, either X-Pilot 2.5 or X-Pilot 3.0, those ones had a shorter range. So basically how they achieved the 706 kilometers was by stripping out the X-Pilot system. They also had a stronger regenerative braking system than with the other 2 versions. They then, with an OTA, put that onto the other 2 versions, which bumped their range up. And there was something, I think, some sort of trick with the wheels as well.
Wasn't
that
there
they were
spats
using.
Or something?
Something like that,
Covers?
I believe. Yes. And that's what they were using to get that range. So it was a bit of misinformation in some way, because this is not a version that people are actually going to be buying, because people are probably going to want one with the X-Pilot systems, and that one doesn't have the 706 kilometers.
Yes, but I think even if you go by NEDC, even if you go by the thing, we do our 10% NEDC thing, I think I still won with 670 kilometers.
Okay.
But I will say, even technically speaking, it was a production vehicle that was available for sale, even if, as you say very accurately, who the hell is going to want that car? Who's going to say, yeah, no, I'll get rid of all the, attractive autonomous, semi-autonomous driving features and all the other stuff, and I'll put these ugly wheel spats on just to get an extra, 40,
I think it was just
36 kilometers of range.
I think it was just to grab headlines, really.
Yeah, of course.
Because at the time, it was the longest range of any EV, I think, in China when it came out.
For sure it was. So range-wise, talk to us about the BYD Han.
But what about the 4-wheel drive version?
Oh, the 4-wheel drive version. Did I write that down? Yes, I did. The dual motor gets 562 kilometers out of the 80.9 kilowatt hour battery pack.
That's more like it.
Because if we're comparing there is no 2-wheel drive version of the
that ain't
ET7,
the rules.
So we got
that
to
ain't
have
part
something.
Of the rules.
It's
not a ratio of power or motors to range. It's all range.
I think we have to compare like with like.
I'm with Mark here.
Well, I think you guys are cheaters, and I make the rules, so I'm in the middle box. Middle box makes the rules. So, Elliot, tell us about the BYD Han, which we see featured here in what is an incredible green that just came out for the new 2022, and I cannot wait to see it in person because I think it's gorgeous.
That's like British racing green. I quite like that.
I love like BRG. A teal color.
Mm-hmm. It does have it's a little too light to be BRG, I think, but it's I love it. So, Elliot, please.
If it's got gold wheels as well, then I'm in 100%. So, unfortunately, I'm not going to win this one either. I've got a 77 kilowatt hour battery and gives about 605 kilometers of NEDC range. But for the faster version, it's only 550 kilometers of NEDC range. But I have something you guys don't have, which is the Blade battery. So, the Blade
I have
battery.
battery swapping.
All right. Your turns over. Your turn's over, Mark. It's my turn.
Should have mentioned that earlier. Too late.
Yeah. Blade battery, one of the best batteries on the market in terms of safety. Other companies are using it. I think Toyota are going to use it. I think
NIO is
going
rumored
to
to
use
be
it
as well.
So there you go. If it's good battery, just can't compete with you guys at the moment. But hopefully the next model of Han, then it's going to be some real competition.
The thing, the lesson from all of these, I think, and all these videos we did, apart from maybe like the 120 kilometer range of the cheapest mini EV and QQ ice cream, all these cars have what are incredibly usable ranges. When you're talking about the lowest range version of the P7 is 480 kilometers NEDC, that's very usable. Elliot, what's the range on your G3?
It says 520 NEDC. It's more like 400 on a good day.
Which is
proper kilometers.
I was going to ask you how many times have you felt like it wasn't enough range, but then I remembered the one time that I rode in your G3. We did a video together with Toyota Alphard, and then we had to drive from all the way in the suburbs where we film all the way back to the city center where you live. And there was about a 20-minute highway portion where you and I were looking at each other sweating bullets because we were like, this range is getting really slow. And we made it. We made it with 10 kilometers left.
Something like that, yeah.
Well, that's a big problem sometimes with range, where it says how much range is available, particularly on a highway, because it just drops off so much quicker than the distance you're traveling, doesn't it?
True. So it depends. But I will say these are all very useful, and it's a comment about current EVs and how they're if you have the charging infrastructure that you need, then you can use them. But it is time for us to talk about our final category, which is value. So basically we want to talk about price here. How much do these cars cost? Do you think they are a good value proposition for what they offer? And then this will be the final subjective category. Range wise, I think P7 is going to win. And so according to the very good rules that I've made. And so that's exterior styling went to the P7. The interior styling went to the ET7. So that's a tie. Performance went to the ET7. And then range went to me, so we're at a 2 and 2. 2 and 2 here, neck and neck. The Han, a mighty and appreciated third at the moment. But there is still time because we're talking about the value. Mark, talk to us about how much it costs to get an ET7.
Yeah, so for the cheapest version, it's $448,000. Which I believe is $70,900 or around about 64,100 euros.
Oh, we got euros.
Now,
we got euros in here. I got to start converting my stuff. Hold on. Go
on. Well, to be honest, this is an old conversion I did when I did an article. So the euro has changed quite a bit since then. So the euro's probably not that accurate. They do a Premier Edition as well, which is essentially as if you've ticked all the option boxes. And that is $526,000. That's $83,250, or around about, am I writing? 75,250 euros. Obviously, you could do it with a battery as a service, which would knock some money off the purchase price. I'm not quite sure how that comes into play, but those are the prices as at launch anyway.
Mm-hmm. I believe the renting a battery pack for an ET5 is somewhere between like $70.
ET7.
I'm saying for an ET5 just for reference, because I don't know the ET7 prices off the top of my head. But ET5 I think it was about, let's say $100 to $140 or $70 to $100. In other words, not some insurmountable sum,
right?
If you're willing to, think about it that way.
It's probably going to be the same because it'll be the same battery.
I would expect that to be the case. So the P7, I now have euros as well. The P7 starts at $36,000 US dollars here in China, around 240,000 RMB, I believe, or 230,000 RMB. Which, for context, the Model 3 starts at closer to 300,000 RMB, around $42,000 or $40,000. So we're undercutting that. The most expensive version you can get, the performance version is 52,000 US dollars, which is around 48,400 euros. That $36,000 one was, let me check here. That's right, 33,500 euros for a base P7. Just because you guys, I know you wanted to know, the wing version costs the equivalent of USD $58,000. And I didn't do the euros because who cares? But it also this is why I think the wing it's awesome, but it's a little bit all show and no go. So far as I can tell, the wing is only available with the single motor. Sad.
Really? I think there is a performance version, isn't it?
Maybe in 2021, at least the 2022 models that I was looking at, I couldn't find a wing in performance. I would be surprised. I'm not gonna say that's the final say in that, because I would be very surprised, and I think it would be a huge loss if they didn't have a performance version of the wing, because they would charge probably $60,000+ for that. But value wise, I really do think that the P7 offers a lot, even if you were to go up a little bit in the chain. And maybe my personal preference would be a single motor, longer range version that's going to get 670 kilometers NEDC. It's going to have X-Pilot, so it's a very, as far as what's available on the market right now, it's a very impressive semi-autonomous driving system, ADAS. It's useful. The interior, while the material qualities are not what I would say, certainly not to ET7 levels, they are nothing to laugh at. And it's got a bunch of great features. So I really do think the P7 has an impressive amount of value built into it. But Elliot, tell us about the Han pricing.
Yeah, so I think, for the price of the Han, you could probably buy two of mine against Mark's one ET7. So the prices start from $32,800 for the base version, and go up to $40,000 for the top of the range. I think it's called Majestic version.
Awesome.
So that's with the dual motors, the all-wheel drive. So I do, for what you get for your money, if you take away the technology side, you get a very fast EV saloon, one of the fastest in the market even now. And you're not spending huge amounts of money. You're not spending as much as a Tesla Model 3. At the end of the day, you have this amazingly built, quite large, practical sedan. So I think in terms of value, I think perhaps the Han might win this category, just because of what you get for your money.
I do think you make a pretty compelling argument. I think the Han, we have to say that the ET7, I think all of these offer good value. I mean, this is not just me trying to pat us on the back for picking good cars. I think whenever category they're representing, the ET7 is offering some serious luxury materials, serious luxury features at a price that is half as much as a Mercedes-Benz S-Class here in China, half as much as a 7 Series, about an A8, all of those, what certainly what NIO considers to be the competitors to this vehicle. So in its category, it's a very good value. I also think the P7, for the reasons that I described, has really good value. But if you're talking about performance alone, it's undeniably the Han. I mean, performance alone, I don't think that there is a car available that is cheaper and faster than the Han in China. Please tell me if I'm wrong. If there's an electric car, maybe the new BYD Seal will be. The Seal.
Polestar, maybe?
Polestar is 4.4 second. Their fastest is
Polestar's
4.8.
not very fast.
It's not that fast. So also the Polestar is a little more expensive. Well, regardless, if you want the performance version, I think it's well over 45,000, around 45,000. But so that's actually kind of hard. We can't vote for our own car. We're going to do this as a subjective thing. So Mark, which of these two choices given to you, which is the P7 and the Han, which do you think has the best value?
If you're asking which has the best value, rather than to which I would rather have,
yes,
I would go for the Han.
Okay. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's a lot. It's a big car. Yeah, I think I have to go with the Han too, because it's a big car. There's great space inside. It's comfortable. We didn't talk a lot about driving dynamics. I think that the P7 is pretty athletic. It's definitely more leans towards being a sports sedan. Maybe not as athletic as a Tesla Model 3, but more athletic than the Han. That's how I've always put them. It's like Model 3 handling wise, and then P7, and then Han. The Han, however, is pretty composed, which you want it to be when it's got, almost nearly 500 horsepower and 0 to 100 kilometers in 3.9 seconds. So yeah, I gotta say, of the three cars, I would be, because I don't care that much about autonomous driving tech personally, I would go with the Han, and I think it's pretty hot looking too. I get it in that green. But so the value category will go to the Han. But Elliot, just out of curiosity, P7 versus ET7 value.
For me, it's got to be the P7 because you get some of the kind of tech features of the NIO. You get some of the quality of the NIO. You get some of the speed from the Han. So P7 for me.
All right.
Good all-rounder.
So I don't think anybody voted for the ET7 for this final category. So if we look at the voting, hey, listen, we got to come down because it's 2 and 2 and 1. So the Han's going to be in third. Somebody's got to get first. And I think that I overall total got more votes than the ET7. Does anybody think of a more fair way to decide it?
No, you did. I think you've won.
Yeah.
That'll make you happy.
Yes. It doesn't happen a lot, all right? I don't want to... It doesn't happen a lot, but I appreciate it. But great debate, guys. Thank you for bringing your choices. Thank you to you guys for watching. I hope that you maybe agreed with what we had to say about these cars. If you didn't, of course, please sound off in the comments below. As I said at the beginning, this is probably going to be our last episode, but if you enjoy these videos, if you'd like us to continue doing these, definitely let us know, because we like doing them, but of course we're busy people. We have to carve out time to do it, and we need to know that you're going to watch it. So thank you very much to both of my guests.
Thank you.
Thank you very much again to the audience. Thanks for sticking with us through this lockdown, and hopefully next video will be an actual drive of a car, but either way, we will see you next time.